In this lecture, we're going to talk about the Topology Brush. The Topology Brush is found under the brush menu, B for brush, T for topology. We find it here, and it's used to draw and generate new topology on top of an existing model. Now, you can use this to retopologize a Dynamesh or a Sculptris Pro model into an animatable topology. If you wanted to use that instead of using geometry Z-remesher, you could manually lay out your topology that way. Most often, I find myself using the topology brush to create costume elements and props. And that's what we're going to do in this demonstration. We're going to create a breastplate for this orc using the topology brush. Now, the topology brush can only be used on a mesh that just has a single subdivision level. So if we select it and then try and draw, oops, B for brush, T for topology, and select the topology brush, and it's asks us to enable dynamic draw size, which we have. And you see if we try and draw on here, it will not allow us to do anything because we need to have multiple subdivision levels, or we cannot have multiple subdivision levels. So what I like to do is create a proxy model, and on that proxy model is where I do all of my topology drawing, and then I'll delete the proxy model, leaving the resulting topology. So to do that, I'll go to the subtool menu and I will duplicate this Z tool. And the duplicate, I'm going to turn on solo mode, so I'm not seeing any of the other subtools, and I will go to geometry, and I'm going to step down to about a mid-subdivision level, and then delete lower and delete higher. Now, because the resulting topology will be quite simple, I don't need to worry about quite the level of secondary form that I have here on this mesh, and I find it easier to get the topology brush to work in a consistent manner if I just go in with the smooth brush and just take back some of the nuances in the shape. Now, I don't want to smooth it down entirely, but I do just want to take back some of the little nooks and crannies and just make it a little bit more simplified. There we go. Now to begin, we're going to draw our center line. So I'm going to turn my draw size up so I get a lot of spaces in between my vertices, or my points along the curve, and I'm just going to draw a center line curve down the front. And you see that curve sticks to the underlying mesh, and like any other curve control in Zbrush, as I mouse over it, I get that the brush becomes blue. We'll come along to the back and we'll do the same thing and draw a center line down the back. Now I'm going to draw a circle around the arms. Now I want to be careful not to accidentally grab the curve back here, and just make sure that I'm drawing my circle here around the arm and it's not sticking to anything I don't want it to stick to. So if I connect to the end of the curve there, you see it will carry on and continue that curve around. So we'll bring it all the way back up here and then attach it to the end point. Now the end point there is going to have a vertex on it. So now let's go ahead and start from the center and let's draw the neckline. Now you see there that snapped to that vertex, and we don't want it to do that. I'm going to turn my draw size down just a little bit so I get a little bit more of a resolution to my curve. There we go. And we will bring the curve from the center line and then connect it to that point. And now I will draw from this point to this point. Let's zoom in there and draw from this point to, let's turn our draw size down so it's a bit easier. Go from this point to this point. And now we have connected those 2 points. But we don't have any quads yet. So if I draw another line here, you see now this automatically generates a quad for us. Now I've got these 2 little hanging edges here. If I hold down the Alt key and then draw across those curves, it will delete those. So let's do another one here. Let's draw a curve from here to here. And there we get another curve. I'm going to draw a curve from here to the center line. And we want to get a polygon here. If I Alt-click on the surface, that will generate my mesh. And you see the resulting mesh. I'm going to undo that and then switch color and then Alt-click. You see the resulting mesh doesn't have a face there because it's not reading that as a point. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm just going to make sure that I carry this line up. Now that gives me a vertex there. And now hopefully if I connect this across, we get a proper quad. So it's a little time consuming, but topology always is. I'm going to start from the center line and draw out here. I just want to draw another line there. Now that didn't register as a quad there, or as a point. So I'm going to undo that and just do this again and make sure that I traverse across there and make sure that those two curves touch, and that gives me a nice quad there. Now, oops, undo. Let's do again from here. Let's draw to there. And I could make these points quite big. Now this, you see it sort of snapped over here and made an extra point. I don't want that. That's messy, so I need to be careful. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to try and draw just from here across. And I actually made that point. I made that face not exactly where I wanted. I want it to be right here. There we go. So now I get a nice quad right there. Now I'm going to carry this edge down, bring this all the way down to the waist. And now let's go ahead and start from the center line of the back and bring this over to here. Zoom in, and you see we actually got a little extra line there. Let's get rid of that. And then let's draw another one from here to here. And that draws a big, nice quad right there. And we'll just split that with another. And then we'll split from up here, going all the way down. Actually, let's undo that and try and get that a little bit closer to the center. And there we go. So we've got some nice quads running down the front. So we'll do the same thing back here. I'm going to carry this line down, and if I overshoot, it'll create vertices where those curves overlap. And then let's bring this curve back and hopefully snap that to the center line there, creating 3 quads. Let's connect this one here. Let's connect this one here. And then we're going to do the same thing here where we create a little turn in our faces. So I'm going to draw a quad here, and I'm going to draw a quad here. And I'm going to carry on from this point to the center line, and that fills that out with the quad as well. So I might want to divide that just to keep that even. And then we'll draw another line going through here, and that'll split that up even more. Now you'll notice I've got a whole bunch of hanging curves along the edges here. If I hold down the Alt key and just click and drag a line anywhere on the model, it'll delete any hanging edges that don't serve a purpose. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and Alt-click on the surface, and that will generate my topology. If I go into frame mode, you can see the mesh that we're going to generate. Now, it's not the exact shape that I want yet, but that's fine. It's simple and easy to shift around with the move brush, and that's what's important. So right now, the generated topology is unmasked. So I'm going to Control-click on the background, and that inverts the mask. So the topology I want to keep is masked. Oops, I just want to actually undo that. I want to make sure that I'm not actually getting my endpoint there. Let me continue that edge and then Alt-click. There we go. So you notice that there, when I didn't have that little edge, when I Alt-click, it actually isn't generating that quad. So I'm going to undo that and just carry that edge up, Alt-click, and this time we get our quad there. Now you may be wondering now how you can change the thickness of this mesh. So if we undo back to our curves and then change our draw size, we'll turn this up. And then if we Alt-click on our mesh, oops, make sure I switch my color back. Let's undo that. That will change the thickness of the resulting model. It will become much, much thicker based on my draw size. If I turn my draw size down quite small and Alt-click, it becomes quite thin. If I turn my draw size all the way down to 1 and Alt-click, you see that we get this very, very thin shell. There we go. So we want to pick the ideal thickness. So we'll just turn this up a little bit, Alt-click, and that's quite reasonable for a bit of armor because we're going to do some smoothing on it. Now, to get this separated from our proxy mesh, invert the mask so the geometry we want to keep is masked and the body is unmasked. Remember, this is just a proxy mesh. And we will go to the Tool menu, go to Visibility, and click Hide Point, and that hides the unmasked points. Now, I need to make sure that I don't lose that curve up there. So let me go back up there and just draw that curve again. Alt-click. There we go. So let's go ahead and hide point, and that hides the unmasked points. And those, basically that's the proxy body. So I go to Geometry, Modify Topology, and click Delete Hidden, and then turn off Solo, leaving just our breastplate. So now we'll take the move brush and start shifting this into a more reasonable shape. So a breastplate has quite high scalloping in the front and the back, and it can't be sitting, right on the waistline because then the person or creature inside is not going to be able to actually bend and move. So we want to shift these shapes around and make sure that they're kind of a reasonable shape to allow for for actual, movement and use in battle. Let's spread that neck out a little bit. And what I'm going to like to do here is I'm going to take these points and I'm going to pull these forward. I want to make a little spike along the front here, a little bladed kind of edge. That's quite a nice aggressive feature that you actually do see on some early suits of armor for hand-to-hand combat. Sort of you can impale somebody on your breastplate. Let's go ahead and add a subdivision level. Control D adds a subdivision level, and if we go into frame mode, Shift F, you can see that this topology that has been generated has three shells. It has an outer shell, it has a thickness shell, and an inner shell. And that's going to be really, really handy as we move forward sculpting it. So let's go ahead and bring these out so it really does cover the chest. Let's add another subdivision level so we can get a little bit more nuance in that shape. Let's scallop up the thoracic bit here. Again, that's just to allow for actual movement, so it's not going to be limiting the sort of battle capacity of the wearer. And then we'll just bring this up here, like so. And I'll just do a little bit of smoothing on the outer shell and just pull out with the move brush just to make sure that we don't end up crashing into the underlying body. And I just want to snap to a front view and just do a little shift to these shapes here. And there we go. Let's turn off frame mode and let's just add another couple subdivision levels here so we get that nice and smooth. I'll take the damn standard brush, turn down my Z intensity, and let's just hold down the Alt key and do a little bit of a kind of a pinch there. Do another one right next to it and replay that stroke. I have my replay stroke button, which is under stroke, modifiers, replay last. I have a custom hotkey for that set to option 1 or alt 1 if you're on the PC. And what that does is it just replays my stroke. So there's a stroke, and then if I press that hotkey, it just replays that over and over again, further sharpening that, that effect. So let's draw that there. Great. And just do a couple little streaks along there. Nice. Now what I'd like to do is add a little bit of surface texture to this to kind of give it kind of a hammered quality. So I'm going to take the standard brush, I'm going to go to the spray stroke, and I'm going to select an alpha that's got a real sharp fall off like this, and I'm going to turn my focal shift up and my draw size down. Make sure I am on Z add, and let's add another subdivision level. Let's take this up pretty high because it's a very, very low base model. So we've got it at 2 million polygons now. And if I hold down the Alt key, that's too strong. Let's turn our Z intensity down, and then we can create this sort of hammered metal quality here. Now that's going to start pushing in and crashing into the body, but that's totally fine. We can fix that. Just want to get a nice surface texture here so it feels like a hammered metal. Go, take our standard brush, pull that out, oops, pull that out, pull that out, and maybe we'll just put a little scallop down in this. That gives it a nice kind of aggressive quality. Now, of course, we want to put some kind of seam here, so it's two different shells that are latched together on the interior. So I'll go to my damn standard brush and go to the stroke menu, go to lazy mouse, turn on backtrack, turn on snap to track, turn on line, and turn track curvature all the way up. Turn my draw size down, and I'm just going to draw a line here, and then I'm going to backtrack across it. And I'm going to turn my draw size down and then replay that stroke a few times, and that should give us a nice little seam right there. And we'll do another one up here. The idea being we don't want it to look like it's been molded in place onto the creature. We want it to appear that it can be assembled, that it does have two different parts there. Now, of course, we could add rivets to this using a mesh insert brush, and once again, I would need to create a proxy object for that just by duplicating the subtool and then going to geometry, stepping down the subdivision levels and just delete lower and higher, and then solo it. And then I would just go to B for brush, I for insert, and we can do industrial parts, for example, or actually those look more contemporary. Let's do clothing, because there's a nice little rivet here. There we go. The snap top half works nicely for a rivet. So if I click and drag, let's switch color. Just turn that to white. We get a nice rivet shape there, but we want them all to be the same size. So I'm going to turn my draw size down. I'm going to start drawing my rivet and then press and hold the control key. And what that does is it snaps that rivet to my draw size. So that ensures that every rivet that we place here is actually going to be the same size. So you're not going to have a whole bunch of different sized rivets being weird. There we go. So now we will go into frame mode, and I will just Control-Shift-Click on each of these polygroups to hide them, leaving the rivets behind, and go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, and then turn off Solo. So then we've got our rivets as a little separate subtool there. So the Topology Brush is very, very useful, like I said, for creating things like costume elements or props, or anytime that I want to generate a new bit of geometry that's based on an existing mesh, I'll often either use mesh extraction or I'll use the Topology Brush to do that. So here you see it's quite thick. This is a nice chance to use our polygrouping. I'm going to step down my subdivision levels, and I'm going to Control-Shift-Click and mask the outermost shell. Now I can take my Move brush. Let's step down our subdivision levels, and I can only impact the inner shell. So if I want to thin this out and bring this edge up, I can do that. So let's go ahead and move this, and this, and step back up our subdivision levels. And let's just do a little bit of smoothing here. Let's turn up the Z intensity on our smooth brush. And because I have that outer shell masked, it's going to be protected from being impacted by that smooth brush. Turn off Solo. Now you see we're getting a bit of a nicer looking edge there. Here it's scalloping in a little bit too much, so go back to Solo. Take the Move brush and just sort of scooch this in. Or scooch this out, I should say. Oops, undo that, step back down, and move these in. Now, another neat thing that you can do if you are doing armor like this, I just want to touch on this before we wrap up. If I step up to my highest subdivision level, something that I like to do is go to the Geometry menu and go to Clay Polish. And under Clay Polish, I turn up R-sharp. I turn up sharp and then R sharp, and then hit the clay polish brush. And what this does is it polishes and sort of facets and angles the model here. And you'll see in just a moment, it gives you this very interesting kind of selection of facets and planes. There you go. You see the effect that has. It can be quite effective for making something feel more metallic or more hard surface. So I quite like using the clay polish brush for things like that. That will create a mask, so Control, click, and drag to get rid of that mask, and there we go. So that is the Topology Brush. I hope you found this video useful. Remember when you're using it to always create a proxy mesh, because it only functions on a model that has a single subdivision level, and adjust your draw size to adjust how fine your curve is. Sometimes the curve works better when it's at a bigger resolution, like when you're drawing your center lines, and other times it works better at a finer resolution so it can really snap to the other curves and give you a proper quad. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.